Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to episode 2 of the Cyberdark Saga, where we're going to make Cyberdarks the best deck in the game. In part 1, we made a Cyberdark deck using the 3 structure decks, but today I've upgraded the deck, and now we're working with a much better Cyberdark deck. So without further ado, let's get right into the profile. Alright, to begin here, we have one copy each of your Cyberdark Edge, Cyberdark Horn, and your Cyberdark Keel. We need to play one of each because we need to be able to summon our Cyberdark Dragon. So one of each is fine. They can come up because their effects are decent. When they're summoned, you target a dragon or machine monster in the graveyard and equip it to them, and then you gain attack. So in certain situations it can help you get some of your Cyberdark effects, like the effect of your Cyberdark Cannon or your Cyberdark Claw. So one copy of each is just fine. Next up we have 3 copies of your Cyberdark Claw. You can discard this from your hand to search any Cyberdark spell trap. So this is a fantastic combo starter. It can search you something like your Cyberdark Realm, so I can search you any other Cyberdark card, or you can even search your Cyberdark Horizon in order to dump a bunch of cards that way. It also has the effect where if it's equipped to a monster and that monster battles, you can send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. So we run some targets for that. We run stuff like an Entis, we run an Adagnister Synchro monster, but this can even send something like a Cyberdark End Dragon in order for you to summon your Cyberdarkness End Dragon. Also, if it's sent to the graveyard while equipped to a monster, you can target a Cyberdark monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So definitely one of the best cards in the deck, definitely run out of 3. Next up, 2 copies of Cyberdark Cannon. It allows you to discard it to add a Cyberdark monster from your deck to your hand. If it's equipped to a monster and that monster battles, you can send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if it's sent to grave while being equipped to a monster, you can draw a card. Being able to send a monster from deck to grave is really good, because we can send something like a Herz, so we can search a Cyberdragon, or we can even send something like a Dragon Buster, so we can lock our opponent out of the extra deck. So 2 copies is very nice. Next up, 2 Cyberdark Chimera. You can discard a spell trap in order to add Power Bond from your deck to your hand, and then you can banish material from the graveyard the next time you fusion summon. So you can basically use Power Bond as an overload fusion, which is very strong. And also if it's sent to graveyard, you can Foolish Burial a Cyberdark monster from your deck. So another fantastic card. This is an essential combo piece. We can use this as part of a 1-card OTK combo with our Cyber Dragon core, or we can use it to help go into our Cyberdark End Dragon, or even our Cyberdarkness Dragon. So 2 copies is fantastic. Next up, 1 copy of Cyber Dragon. This is great for contact fusing. It's also great to have 1 copy because we can search it off of Herz. Next up, 3 copies of our Cyber Dragon core. On summon, searches any cyber spell trap, which includes all of our Cyberdark spell traps. So this searches basically any spell trap in the deck. So this is a really good 1-card OTK combo because we can use this to search our Cyberdark Realm, which can bring out our Chimera, which will allow us to get Power Bond, and we can OTK that way. So another fantastic card in the deck, so definitely run out of 3. And next up, 1 Cyber Dragon Herz. Really good in combination with our Cyberdark Horizon because we can dump this from deck to grave, and then we can search a Cyber Dragon. So a really nice one of, not 100% mandatory, but it's nice to have. Next we have 1 copy of our King Regulus. Regulus is really cool because it equips a monster from the graveyard in order to summon it, which means you can use your Cyberdarkness Dragon in order to remove the equip card from Regulus to negate an effect. Regulus doesn't need the equip card in order to negate, so you have your Regulus negate and you have an extra Cyberdarkness Dragon negate because all it needs to do is remove an equip card from the field to negate an effect. So it's a fantastic card. We can't search it in this deck because I don't run the field spell and I don't run Clockwork Night. I don't think they're too necessary. I think just a 1 copy is nice to have. Clockwork Night is not a bad option, but I don't think this deck necessarily needs it, so the 1 copy of Regulus is all we need. Future Sean here. After doing some testing, I think that 3 Clockwork Night is very essential for the deck. Helps you do a lot of really good combos, helps you break boards. It's actually very good. Later on in the profile I have 3 Nibiru. I think you can take out 3 Nibiru, put in 3 Clockwork Night, and there you go. It's a bit pricey however, so if you're a budget player, I recommend something like 2 Regulus and then 1 of the field spell. That pretty much gets the job done. Anyway, back to the profile. And for the big funnies, we have Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. If it's equipped to a monster, your opponent cannot special summon from the extra deck. There's a lot of different ways to get this onto our monsters. All of our Cyberdarks equip stuff from the graveyard to them. So if you have this in grave, any one of your Cyberdarks can equip it to themselves, and then your opponent's locked out of the extra deck. We can dump this to the grave using either Foolish Burial, or we can use our Protector Whelp linked to in the extra deck. Not always possible, but a very nice option to have. Next up, the hand traps, we have triple Ash, and we have triple Nibiru. Just good hand traps in the deck. Just generically good hand traps. You can run anything you want in this spot. You can run board breakers, you could run more hand traps if you wanted to, but I like this hand trap ratio. We also run Imperm as a little 9 hand trap ratio for the deck. Onto the spells now, we have triple Cyberdark Realm. On activation, it allows you to add a Cyberdark monster from deck to hand. It also gives you an additional normal summon of a Cyberdark monster. And it also allows you to equip a monster from your opponent's graveyard to one of your Cyberdark monsters if your Cyberdark monster would equip from your graveyard instead. So it's a fantastic card. The first two effects are way more important than the last effect, but it can come up. But being able to search any one of your Cyberdark monsters is fantastic. Any additional normal summon is just really, really good. Next we have 2 copies of your Cybernetic Horizon. It always counts as a Cyberdark card, so there's no issue searching it. So this allows you to send a dragon or machine cyber monster, one from your deck and one from your hand to the grave, to then add one dragon or machine cyber monster from your deck to your hand, and send one cyber machine fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. So this is a fantastic card for your combos. Basically gets 3 cards into the graveyard and you get to add a card. The turn you activate this, you can only summon machine monsters from the extra deck, so it does limit you a little bit, because you can't buster lock your opponent that way with your link monster. But it's still fantastic for your regular combos. Definitely run this at 2, you can search it as part of your main combo. So a 2 of is really, really good. Next up, 1 Cyberdark Inferno. It gives your Cyberdark monsters protection. They cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. It also lets you bounce one of your Cyberdark monsters from the field to your hand, and then immediately after normal summon another Cyberdark. So that can come up in certain weird situations. But if it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can add a fusion spell from your deck to your hand, which can search you Overload Fusion, which is pretty cool, but won't really come up too much. The main use of this is your protection effect, so 1 copy is very nice, and we can search it off a lot of our cards. Next up, 3 copies of Cyber Emergency. This can search core, which can start our combos that way, because core can search anything. Also, if it's negated, you can discard a card to add this to your hand. So fantastic 3 of. You always want to see this in your opening hand, so definitely run it at 3. Next up, 2 copies of Power Bond and 1 copy of Overload Fusion. Now we run 2 copies of Power Bond mainly because if we want to be able to use Cyberdark Chimera's effect to use graveyard cards as fusion material, we need to be able to search Power Bond first. So if we draw this, that means that Chimera is dead. And Chimera is super important to our combos, so we really want to have the 2 Power Bond. And Power Bond is not once per turn, so we can just use 2 Power Bond in a turn. Fantastic for OTKs as well. And Overload Fusion, because a lot of our cards are going to go to graveyard. So if we have Overload Fusion, we can go into a lot of really, really strong extra deck monsters. So I like this little fusion spell ratio right here. Next up, 1 Foolish Burial. There's so many good targets in the deck for Foolish Burial. Can send any one of our Cyberdark monsters in order to gain their effects in the graveyard, and it can also send our Dragon Buster, which helps us go for an extra deck lock. So 1 copy I really like. Finally, we have 1 Cyberdark Invasion, the only trapper running here. So once per turn, we can do 1 of 2 effects. So we can equip 1 dragon or machine monster from either graveyard to a Cyberdark monster we control, and then it gains 1000 attack. Or we can send an equip card equipped to one of our machine monsters to the graveyard to pop a card in the field. So it's really nice, really good card to have. It's searchable as well, so I think 1 copy is really, really good. And to round out the main deck, triple Imperm, because why not? The little hand trap ratio we have I think is pretty good. You can obviously replace the hand traps if you want with other hand traps, or you can even put in board breakers, but I think 3 Imperm is a nice way to round out the deck. Alright, now onto the extra deck, we have 1 copy of our Cyberdark End Dragon. This is your main boss monster of the deck. It's at 5k towers, unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. Once per turn, you can target a monster in either player's graveyard and equip it to your Cyberdark End Dragon, and it can attack a number of times up to the number of equip cards equipped to it. So fantastic boss monster. It's a bit hard to get out, but it's really good once it's on the field. The only real out to this card is a kaiju or battling over it, but with 5k attack that's going to be very hard to do. It's very possible to get this card out, and once you have it out, it can be a real menace for your opponent to get rid of. Next up we have 1 Cyberdarkness Dragon, arguably better than Cyberdark End Dragon because it actually gives you some negates. It needs 5 Cyberdark monsters, but they can be any Cyberdark monsters. When it's summoned, you can equip a dragon or machine monster from your graveyard to it. And when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send 1 equipped card on the field to the graveyard to negate that effect. Not once per turn, and the cards don't need to be equipped to it. So if your Cyberdark End Dragon has an equipped card, you can send that to the graveyard to negate your opponent's effects. Or if your Regulus has an equipped card onto it, you can also send that to negate your opponent's effects. And of course, it also gains attack equal to the original attack of the monster equipped to it, so it can get pretty big, especially if you summon it with Power Bond. Honestly, probably even better than your main boss monster. Next up, 1 Cyberdark Dragon. It needs the original 3 Cyberdark monsters, so Cyberdark Keel, Cyberdark Edge, and Cyberdark Horn. So when it's summoned, you target a dragon engrave, equip it to it, and it gains the attack. So the main reason you run this is that it's technically easier to go into than your Cyberdarkness Dragon, and you can still use this to go into your Cyberdark End Dragon. And I guess it also can set up your Buster Lock if you have it in grave. It's not terrible to run. You can also send it to grave off of your Cybernetic Horizon. So it's not terrible. It's also a Cyberdark deck. You have to run a Cyberdark Dragon. So one copy is alright, but you can cut it if you want. Next up we have one Cyber End Dragon. Technically we can summon it in this deck. We do run Cyber Dragon and we run Cores and Herz. So we have plenty of ways to get Cyber Dragons on field. But you're not really going to be summoning this, you're going to be using this with your Cybernetic Horizon, sending it to grave, equipping it with one of your Cyberdarks, and then using it to go into your Cyberdark End Dragon. But in certain cases, with Power Bond you can summon this, and you have an 8k attack ready to go. You can OTK your opponent, so it's really cool to have, so the one copy is essential. Next up, another cool way to OTK is your Cyber Twin Dragon. It needs 2 Cyber Dragons, has 2800 attack and can attack twice. So with Power Bond, this is 2 attacks with 5600 attack. Easier to go into than your Cyber End Dragon. In certain situations, even better than your Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. So I like to run the one copy, but it's not essential. Next up we have Cyber Eternity Dragon. This is more of a defensive card. It needs Cyber Dragon plus 2 machines. So if you have a machine fusion in your graveyard, your opponent cannot target or destroy this with card effects. If it's sent to grave by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon a Cyber Dragon from anywhere, from your hand, deck, or grave. And also you can banish this from the graveyard, and then this turn, your opponent cannot target or destroy your fusion monsters this turn. So most of the time it's not very good, but what you can do is dump this off of your Cybernetic Horizon, and then it will give your fusion monsters on the field protection for the rest of the turn. So this is probably like the best deck to use Cyber Eternity Dragon in, so I like the one copy, I think it's pretty cool. Next up we have one copy of your Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. A very good way for going for OTKs, especially in combination with your Power Bond. On summon, it can pop spells and trap your opponent controls up to the number of fusion material used for it. Unfortunately, you can only use Cyber Dragon monsters to summon him, so he's not always available, but he's fantastic for OTKs. He also has the effect where he can send 2 light machines from deck to grave in order to gain that many additional attacks. So if you summon him with Power Bond, you have 3 attacks with 4200, which is almost always an OTK, so fantastic card to have in the deck. Definitely run it at 1. Next up, Chimeratech Overdragon. On summon it wipes your field, but it gains 800 attack times the fusion material. And for fusion material, it just needs a Cyber Dragon and any amount of machines. So with Power Bond or Overload Fusion, you can get this guy up very high depending on how many machines you use as fusion material. It also gains attacks on monsters equal to the amount of fusion material used for it. So in certain situations, this can be a very good way to OTK your opponent or to break their board, but most of the time you'll be using your Rampage Dragon. Next up we have our Chimeratech Fortress Dragon and our Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon. They're both used for clearing our opponent's board through contact fusing. Fortress Dragon is summoned by using a Cyber Dragon monster you control and any amount of machine monsters your opponent controls. If you run Clockwork Night, this is just a board wipe entirely, and then it gains 1000 attack for each monster used as fusion material. So we can get it pretty big if your opponent's playing a machine deck, it's pretty cool. But Megafleet is going to be used more often because it just needs a Cyber Dragon monster and an opponent's link monster in the extra monster zone. So if your opponent has something like an Apollosa, you can just set a Cyber Dragon core and then contact fuse into your Megafleet, which is fantastic. Gains 1200 attack for each material, but it's only going to go up to 2400. But a very nice card to have. Definitely run these 2 guys because contact fusing is a really good mechanic in the game. Finally, for the links, we have 1 copy of your Salman Great Almirage, mainly to get your smaller monsters off the field. So if you summon something like a Core or a Cyberdark Chimera, you can use their effects and then link them off into Almirage to get them into the graveyard. So definitely a great card to have at 1. Also, it can protect some of your monsters if that really matters, which it can come up in certain situations. Next up we have Cyber Dragon Seeger. Just needs 2 machine monsters including a Cyber Dragon. So the main use for this card is to boost up your machine monsters. During the battle phase, if this card is not attacked, you can target a machine monster you control with 2100 or more attack, and it gains 2100 attack and defense until the end of the turn. But your Seeger can't do battle damage that turn, which doesn't really matter. You can use this to boost up an already power bonded Chimeratech Rampage Dragon in order to do way more damage. It also counts as Cyber Dragon, which can be helpful for some of your combos because you want a Cyber Dragon on field in order to go into your Rampage Dragon. So 1 copy is very nice, helps you OTK, helps you get damage on board, nice card to have. For the final link, we have 1 copy of your Protector Whelp. It's a generic link too, just needs 2 monsters. On summon at Foolish Burials, your Dragon Buster from deck to grave, which can help you set up your extra deck lock. Not always possible because your Cybernetic Horizon locks you into machines, but a nice card to have. If you can get this out, it can be devastating to your opponent because an extra deck lock is pretty much game over. And finally, we have Entis and Wind Pegasus ad Ignister. These are mainly targets for your Cyberdark Claw. If Claw is equipped to a monster and that monster attacks, you can send an extra deck monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. If you send Entis, you can pop a card in the field, and if you send Wind Pegasus ad Ignister, you can bounce a card. So 2 great targets in the extra deck to have. You might as well run them because Claw is a pretty cool effect. So that's it for the updated Cyberdark deck profile. Overall, I think this deck has come a long way since the 3 structure deck build. It's a lot more consistent, has a lot more extra deck cards as well. The extra deck lock is a really cool gimmick that I really like. Obviously we had to add more hand traps to make it a bit more competitive. So I think overall this deck is going to be much better. For the next part of the Cyberdark Saga, we'll be doing a combo guide. I'll show you guys a bunch of really cool combos for Cyberdarks, so stay tuned for that. So thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments, and stay tuned for the finale of the Cyberdark Saga, where we pit Cyberdarks up against Cyberdragons.